A millionaire asked his black maid's 12-year-old daughter to play the piano for fun, but she was a musical prodigy. "Sophia, come here now," Robert Whitmore shouted from his Italian leather armchair, interrupting the lively conversation he was having with his millionaire guests. The 12-year-old girl was helping her mother, Carmen, serve canapes in the luxurious living room of their Beverly Hills mansion. The girl approached timidly, her hands still wet from washing dishes in the kitchen. Around her, 6 men in suits, and their wives covered in jewelry watched her with that look she knew so well, a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "My friends are bored," Robert declared with a cruel smile, gesturing toward the Steinway grand piano that dominated the corner of the room. "How about entertaining us a little? I understand your mother said you play the piano." Victoria Whitmore, the millionaire's 16-year-old daughter, giggled maliciously from the sofa. "Daddy, she can barely read. How is she going to play the piano?" The guests chuckled, approving the joke. Sophia felt the heat rise to her neck, but she maintained the upright posture her mother had always taught her. Carmen appeared at the kitchen door, her face tense with worry, but she didn't dare intervene. She knew very well where her place was in that house. "Come on, girl," Robert insisted, clapping his hands impatiently. "Play something simple. Maybe Happy Birthday. My friends will love to see how hard you try." What those millionaires didn't know was that Sophia had woken up at 5 every morning for the past 8 years to practice on the piano in the abandoned church 6 blocks away, where Father Martinez let her in before work. Her small, calloused hands weren't just from helping her mother clean. Sophia walked slowly to the piano, her worn sneakers making noise on the immaculate marble. She sat down on the padded bench and adjusted the height, ignoring the condescending whispers behind her. Robert crossed his arms, already anticipating the cheap entertainment he would get from the girl's failure. Victoria recorded everything on her cell phone, eager to post it on social media later. For a moment, Sophia hesitated with her hands on the keys. Then something changed in her eyes. A silent determination that only exists in those who carry secrets too powerful to be revealed before the right time. If you've ever witnessed the exact moment when someone who has been underestimated is about to silence all their critics, then you know that the silence before the storm always carries a special energy. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a 12-year-old girl turned humiliation into something those millionaires would never forget. The keys of the Steinway gleamed under the light of the crystal chandelier as Sophia adjusted her posture on the bench. Robert Whitmore picked up his 1,000 glass of red wine and leaned back in his armchair, clearly enjoying what he considered a domestic charity spectacle. "Everyone silence," Robert announced theatrically to his guests. "Let's see if the taxes I pay for these public schools were worth anything." The laughter that followed echoed through the room like the sound of crystal shattering. Victoria pointed her cell phone at Sophia, already imagining the likes she would get on Instagram with a video of the little maid trying to play the piano. At her side, Margaret Steinberg, wife of an oil tycoon, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Poor thing, she probably can't even read the notes properly." Carmen watched everything from the kitchen door, her hands trembling as she held the empty tray. She knew exactly what her daughter was capable of, but she also knew the price they would both pay if Sophia revealed her true talent. In that house, they were invisible by necessity, not by choice. What those millionaires didn't know was that Sophia had grown up listening to her mother cry softly in the bathroom after particularly humiliating days. Carmen had been a classical pianist in Colombia before immigrating to the United States, where her degrees weren't worth the paper they were printed on, and her talented hands were relegated to scrubbing toilets for people who would never play a single note. "Come on, honey," Robert encouraged with false kindness. "Play something we know. How about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? I'm sure you can do that." Charles Morrison, owner of a chain of hotels, laughed so hard he almost knocked over his $300. "Whiskey, Robert, you're terrible. The girl probably doesn't even know where the black and white keys are." It was then that Sophia looked up for the first time since she had sat down at the piano. Her gaze slowly swept across every face in the room. Robert with his condescending smile, Victoria with her cell phone still recording, the guests with their expressions of cruel amusement. For a moment, something flashed across her eyes that made the atmosphere grow slightly more tense, like the air before a storm. "May I choose the song?" Sophia asked, her voice soft but surprisingly firm. "Of course, dear," Robert replied, gesturing magnanimously. "Play whatever you can. We're here to have fun, not to judge." What? What Robert didn't know was that every morning, while he slept in his $15,000 king-size bed, Sophia walked 6 blocks in the cold to practice on the out-often piano at St. Michael's Church. Father Martinez, an old Colombian who recognized the girl's talent, gave her access to the instrument in exchange for a few hours of cleaning. He also didn't know that Carmen spent her only $15 a month on used sheet music that she bought from a street vendor, hiding them in the back of her closet as if they were stolen treasures. Or that Sophia practiced piano silently at the kitchen table every night after they finished dinner, her hands moving over imaginary wood as she listened to recordings on the broken cell phone Carmen had found in the trash and repaired. Victoria laughed again, bringing the phone closer. "Dad, this is going to go viral on TikTok. A maid trying to play our $200,000 Steinway." $250,000, Robert corrected proudly. But who's counting, right? As the guests continued their cruel jokes, Carmen closed her eyes at the kitchen door. She knew her daughter was about to make a decision that would change their lives forever. Sophia could play something simple, remain invisible, and preserve their jobs. Or Sophia took a deep breath, her hands positioning themselves on the keys with a precision that did not go unnoticed by Carmen. It was the same posture she herself had taught years ago when she still believed that talent was enough to open doors in this country. "I hope you like Chopin," Sophia said calmly, her fingers finally touching the first keys. The silence that followed was not the polite silence of expectation. It was the absolute silence of people who had just realized they had catastrophically underestimated something, but didn't yet know exactly what. And in Sophia's eyes, for the first time that night, there was a sparkle that made even Robert Whitmore shift uncomfortably in his Italian leather armchair. The first notes of Chopin came out of the Steinway with a delicacy that made Robert frown. It wasn't the out-of-tune, hesitant sound he had expected from a girl from the suburbs. It was precise, technically correct, but it was still nothing to impress him. "Well, at least she knows where the keys are," Charles Morrison muttered to Margaret Steinberg, both of them still chuckling. Victoria continued recording, already imagining the ironic caption she would post. "When your maid thinks she can play classical piano." Sophia continued playing the nocturne in F-flat major, her small hands navigating the keys with a familiarity that began to catch his attention. Robert leaned forward slightly, confused. The technique was surprisingly good. Not perfect, but definitely beyond what he expected from someone who learned in public school. What Robert didn't know was that Sophia had spent the last 8 years waking up at 5 in the morning, walking 6 blocks in the cold of Beverly Hills to St. Michael's Church. Father Martinez, an old Colombian who had been a conservatory pianist in Bogota before immigrating, recognized the girl's raw talent the first day she showed up asking to just play a little, please. All the while Carmen cleaned the Whitmore's mansion, Sophia practiced on an out-of-tune piano from 1972, her small hands reaching for octaves that were still too big for her. Father Martinez not only allowed her to practice, he taught her sharing decades of musical knowledge he had stored up since leaving his career to serve the Latino community of Los Angeles. Mia, he would say, talent knows no zip code, but discipline. That's what separates the dreamers from the artists. As Sophia reached the first climax of the piece, something changed in the atmosphere of the room. The guests stopped talking. The sound coming from the piano was no longer just technically competent. It had soul. There was interpretation. There were years of pain, hope, and quiet dedication flowing through every note. Carmen watched from the kitchen doorway, tears beginning to form in her eyes. She recognized every nuance of that performance, because she was the one who first placed Sophia's hands on the keys when the girl was only 4 years old. Carmen had been the first violinist in the Maid Symphony Orchestra before fleeing the violence that consumed her hometown. Her diplomas, her achievements, her entire life as a musician, all of it had been reduced to nothing the moment she stepped onto American soil. But she never stopped. In the quiet hours before dawn, after the Whitmores had gone to bed, Carmen Morales whispered music theory to her daughter Sophia at the kitchen table. With her only $15 monthly allowance, Sophia bought used sheet music, slowly building a secret library in the tiny room they shared at the back of the estate. When Sophia sat at the Whitmores' gleaming Steinway, Robert Whitmore expected a child's timid recital. What he got instead was chop and played with rare interpretive maturity. The guests, initially amused, fell silent. Robert shifted uneasily. He had wanted entertainment, not art. He wanted confirmation of his superiority, not questions about his judgment. And the front door opened. Dr. Patricia Williams, renowned Los Angeles Times music critic, arrived early. She froze, riveted by the sound from the living room. In 40 years of hearing the world's greatest pianists, she had rarely encountered talent this extraordinary. Quietly, she stepped closer. Sophia's small hands navigated Chopin's broad chords with ingenuity, never compromising the music's integrity. By the time she finished the nocturne, the laughter had died, replaced by an electric hush. That was the easy part, Sophia said calmly, eyes locked on Robert. Now I'll play something I wrote, for you. The first notes of her own composition drifted through the room like a whispered earthquake. It was not Chopin. It was something wholly newborn of pain, humiliation, and unshakable hope. The melody swelled with the heartbeat of a mother, working 16-hour days, and the stubborn courage of a girl the world refused to see. Patricia Williams discreetly pulled out her phone to record. Robert, wineglass frozen midair, was stunned. This wasn't a performance. It was a narrative, a symphony of lived experience. Guests leaned forward, breath held. Victoria Whitmore, who had planned to post a mocking video, realized with horror she had documented her own downfall. Sophia blended classical structure with jazz harmonies Father Martinez had secretly taught her. Carmen, standing unseen at the kitchen door, wept. Every note told their story, mother and daughter fighting a world determined to diminish them. As the piece built to its climax, Sophia's fingers flashed with virtuosity far beyond her years. The $250,000 Steinway had finally found a worthy player. Patricia Williams stepped fully into the room, abandoning etiquette. Robert, she whispered urgently, do you know who this girl is? She's my maid's daughter, Robert said, voice hollow. This girl has a gift that comes once in a generation. I must speak with her immediately. The final movement incorporated Colombian classical rhythms Carmen had secretly passed to her daughter. When the last note of Invisible rang out, silence followed, not polite silence, but stunned reverence. Patricia began to clap slowly, her voice heavy with awe. Extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Sophia sat at the keys, calm and dignified. This piece, she said softly, is called Invisible. I wrote it for all the people you see every day but never truly see. Robert swallowed hard. He had treated a Prodigy as cheap entertainment. Patricia approached Carmen, eyes bright with recognition. "Carmen Morales," she said, "first violinist of the Medellin Symphony Orchestra. You disappeared 15 years ago after winning the Latin Award for Musical Excellence." Carmen lifted her chin, dignity long buried now rising to the surface. "Dr. Williams, it's an honor to see you again." Robert stared, pale. You know her?" Patricia's glare was glacial. "Robert, you've had one of Latin America's greatest musicians scrubbing your floors for 15 years. And her daughter, one of the most promising prodigies I've ever seen, serving your canapes." The next morning, Patricia's article shook Beverly Hills. The Symphony of Invisibility. How the Elite Wastes Genius. It detailed Sophia's gift and condemned the blindness that had hidden Carmen's brilliance. Victoria's video went viral to 15 million views in 48 hours. Comments were brutal. Imagine paying thousands for lessons only to be humiliated by a maid's daughter. Privilege versus real talent. No contest. Robert's empire crumbled. Business partners fled. Contracts worth $3 million evaporated. His reputation was ruined. Victoria entered rehab, a polite euphemism for social exile. Meanwhile, Carmen was offered an assistant conductor role with the Los Angeles Symphony Orchestra. Sophia received a full scholarship to the Curtis Institute of Music. 3 labels. Fought to record Invisible. 6 months later, Sophia debuted at Walt Disney Concert Hall, performing her composition with the Los Angeles Philharmonic conducted by her mother. The broadcast raised $2 million for scholarships for underprivileged children. Robert watched from one of the cheapest seats, his fortune and arrogance gone. His wife handed him divorce papers mid-performance. Patricia's article stood unassailable. In court, every word was true. Carmen and Sophia now lived in Pasadena, practicing daily on a Steinway they purchased outright, no longer invisible. During the final movement of Invisible, Sophia's eyes briefly met Robert's. There was no anger, only quiet triumph. 5 years later, Sophia is celebrated as one of America's most promising young composers. Carmen leads the Los Angeles Youth Orchestra, opening doors for children once overlooked as she had been. Victoria remains in seclusion, her online career in ashes. Robert finally understood the real meaning of invisible. It isn't being ignored. It's being irrelevant. Sophia chose invisibility as a strategy. Robert earned his as a consequence.